All right, so we're back. Perception, part 3. The Mueller-Lyer illusion. This is a really cool one. So if you take a look at these lines, which one looks bigger? Go ahead and write in your journal which line, the one on the, or which figure, the one on the left or the one on the right, which one looks longer? I bet you said the one on the right, didn't you? Well, turns out the lines in the middle, center lines, are actually the same length. Did I just blow your mind? Look at this. What? Let's do it again. What? Okay, so yeah, so this is an illusion. Let's go through, okay? So you can see the way that these lines are bending is actually creating you an illusion of this one being longer, this one being shorter, excuse me. Okay, so here it's a note. This is kind of blurry, so I'll read it for you. The figure on the left seems to be closer since it looks like an outside corner thrust toward you, whereas the figure on the right looks like an inside corner thrust away from you. Given retinal images of the same length, you assume that the closer line is shorter. Crazy. All right, shape constancy. Okay, so this is something you might see again, perceiving object shapes as unchanging even as retinal images change. It's just say change, not changes. Okay, so a door. So you understand that a door is a rectangle no matter where it is positioned, no matter if it's shut or if it's open, you understand that this is still a rectangle. Okay, it retains its constancy. Okay, look here. This circle and this circle, the two orange ones, okay, Jacob, if you're watching, these two circles in the middle are orange. Same size. What? Crazy. I know. Okay, which circle looks bigger in the middle? You probably think the one on the left looks smaller and the one on the right looks bigger, but they're the same. Here's more. I just thought it'd be fun. Jacob, this is going to be really hard for you. I'm sorry. Someone help Jacob. All right. For those of you in 4th period, Jacob has some color blindness, so that he was telling us about in 3rd period. So, yeah. True or false? Both center patches are the same shade of gray. Okay, so you're looking at these. Do they look the same shade of gray? It's true. They're both the same shade of gray. Okay, so the patch on the right appeared darker due to perceptual contrast with its background. Okay. This is really cool. Do these little flower petals look like they're moving to you? Well, they're not. What? Look at this, same kind of thing. Oh my goodness. Crazy. This one too. Insane. All right, so are you seeing dots? Yeah, there are no dots. Look at this one. I just thought it'd be fun for you to look at these illusions. This looks like it's moving. It's not. The 3 impossible figures, they showed you this in the video, right? And he did the never-ending, climbing and descending stairs in these impossible figures. So I'll read this to you because I know it's probably hard for you to see. The figures are impossible, yet they clearly exist on the page. What makes them impossible is that they appear to be 3-dimensional representations, yet are drawn in a way that frustrates mental attempts to assemble their features into possible objects. It's difficult to see the drawing simply as lines lying on a plane, even though this perceptual hypothesis is the only one that resolves the contradiction. You see that? But it's not really moving. How many feet does this elephant have? What? Crazy. I'm sorry. I'm yawning. Hopefully I don't make you yawn too. It's like... So, sorry, I just kind of awkwardly switched over from the end of perception, yay, we're done with the perception, to some FRQ practice. So you're going to do some stuff in your journal. Oh my gosh, I'm yawning again. I'm sorry. So just some reminders. TDAPS, term, define, apply, provide specifics. Please underline the term when you use it. Always use all the terms no matter what. If it's an apply or doesn't apply, you explain why a term doesn't apply or why it does apply. You never just don't do a term. And again, no cyclical or circular definitions. Don't use the same word for the term as your definition. For example, don't use, like if you had inattentional blindness, don't use they are blind to visible objects when their attention is elsewhere, because it won't score because you used blind for inattentional blindness. So you would have to use like a failure to notice visual objects when attention is elsewhere, something like that. Which, by the way, this is a good term for you to know. Okay, so here is your FRQ practice number 1. I want you to pause this video and copy down this question in your journal. This is your first FRQ practice, okay? So here's the question. Marisol and Brian went out to lunch. Aw, how cute. Little date. All right, use the following terms to explain what happened on their date. All right, your answers will vary. Make sure to use each term, define the term, and apply it to the prompt. So you are coming up with little hypothetical situations that could happen on their date. You're making things up that are happening on their date. And you're using these terms to apply it to their date. Absolute threshold, difference threshold, inattentional blindness, change blindness, bottom-up processing, and selective attention. Okay, so I want you to think of your own hypothetical situations for what could happen on their date. Okay, so I'm going to give you some, but you need to come up with your own. So the best way to do this, if you're doing this in class, is for you to pause the video, to copy down the whole question, and you to think. If you just skip right ahead to me giving you answers, you're never going to learn how to do FRQs if you never try and do them on your own first, because when you take your AP exam, there's nobody giving you the answers. You just have to do it. Okay, so pause the video, try to get this done yourself. Look up the terms if you have to, and make sure you understand what they mean, and then try to think of situations that could happen on a date. They're out to lunch, and you be creative with it and go through. And I will check that your own answers are unique and not my answers. And then you can go through and continue playing this. So if I were you, I would just pause it and then continue on after you've already come up with. So here is here's some of my answers for this. And again, yours are going to look different. So they should be different, but this should help you. Absolute threshold. Remember, the minimum stimulation needed to detect a particular stimulus at least 50% of the time. So here are some random things that could happen. The absolute threshold for people smelling French fries at the restaurant was usually around 10 orders, but differed for each person. Marisol's absolute threshold was about 8 orders, 50% of the time. When at least 8 people were eating an order of fries, Marisol could smell fries. Here's another example. When employees, it should say had, not has, had the volume of music set to 5, level 5, Marisol could hear the music at least 50% of the time. Her absolute threshold for music volume was level 5. Today, she could hear the music at the restaurant. Oh, I can't stop yawning. Okay, difference threshold. The minimum difference between two stimuli, remember we're comparing 2 different things, required for detection at least 50% of the time. So here's Sun. The restaurant wanted to create a romantic atmosphere for the diners. They wanted to have just enough light to be able to read the menu, but not anymore. They found that turning the light to level 1 versus level 2 was the just noticeable difference. Remember, JND is the same as difference threshold for a romantic atmosphere, but still able to read the menu. The JND, the just noticeable difference for the amount of salt added to Marisol's food for her to think it tastes salty, is 1 teaspoon of salt. All right, inattentional blindness, failing to see Remember, we used not blindness, but failing to see visible objects when our attention is directed elsewhere. Brian was so nervous and so focused on opening Marisol's door for her and trying to be a gentleman that he didn't see the parking meter. Oops. All right, so you notice, like, I'm defining it. I'm using the term. I'm defining it. I'm applying it to the actual situation and giving specifics. Here are more. Change blindness. Failing to notice changes in our environment. Okay, so this is probably actually not great because it uses changes. So you want to find a way to say this without using changes. Failing to notice differences, or you're going to have to come up with a different way. Marisol was so focused on talking with Brian that she didn't realize they had a different waiter at the end of their meal than they did at the beginning. So that's an example. Bottom-up processing, analysis that begins with sensory receptors or sensation and works up to the brain for perception, okay? So Brian initially smelled something stinky and then realized it was French onion soup. And then selective attention, the focusing of conscious awareness on a particular stimulus. Marisol was so focused on her cheeseburger that she didn't pay attention when Brian told her that tomorrow is his birthday. Oh, happy birthday, Brian. Sorry. Okay, here is FRQ practice number 2. You're going to do the same thing. Okay, you're going to pause the video and write it out, and you're going to answer it on your own. And then, only then, should you go through and look at my answers, which will be different than yours. Centerville High School is having a school-wide pep rally, and all the students have gathered into the bleachers. As a special guest, they have brought a hypnotist. Explain how the following terms applied to the students at the pep rally. Cocktail party effect, sleep deprivation, disassociation, post-hypnotic suggestion, Broca's area, and cones. So some of these are from Unit 5, and some of these are from Unit 4. So you're going to have to go through, and you probably haven't watched the Unit 5 videos yet, but that's okay. You're going to want to go through your Unit 5 stuff to get some of these answers too. So pause the video here, and then try this on your own and write it in your journal, and then look at the answers. All right, here are the answers. Cocktail party effect. This is an example of selective attention. It's your ability to attend to or focus on only one voice among many. At the pep rally, student Sally, notice I'm making up these random students, was able to talk with her friend student Joe, who was a row down from her despite all the people talking and interacting. Sleep deprivation. This is lack of enough sleep that causes irritability. Clearly, I need sleep now. Difficulty concentrating and interferes with memory processes. Many students had a difficult time concentrating and paying attention to the hypnotist and felt irritable during the pep rally because they did not get enough sleep over the past few days. Disassociation is a split between different levels of consciousness. Hypnotic disassociation helped those that were being hypnotized not feel the pain of putting their arm in an ice bath because they didn't recognize the action as emotional suffering. What a mind. Craziness. Okay, post-hypnotic suggestion is a piece of advice made during a hypnosis session to be carried out after the subject is no longer hypnotized. The hypnotist requested that all the students go home and study that night during the hypnosis session. That night, even though the students were no longer under hypnosis, they decided to study. Broca's area. This one's actually from the brain unit. Okay, in the frontal lobe, and that controls language expression, speech production. So the students, okay, notice I'm now connecting it back to the question. The students were able to talk to the hypnotist because Broca's area allowed them to speak. And then we have cones. Cones help you see color. Cones, color. Cones are retinal receptor cells that are connected near the center of the retina, okay, and that they function in daylight or well-lit conditions. The cones detect fine detail and color. Students' cones allowed them to see the color of the hypnotist's clothing and the fine details of his act in the well-lit gymnasium. So here's a side note. Rods function in the dark, are not well lit, and influence peripheral vision because rods are connected to the outer edges of the retina, as opposed to foveal vision or visual acuity in the fovea because of details in color, which is in the center of the retina or the cones. Okay, so there are some questions on your test. Hopefully you're watching this to the end that deal with this last bit, okay? So Rod's peripheral vision.